everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Bree Buonomo. Hi if you're new here, or hey if you've been here before. And today I'm going to be talking about my March 2022 wrap up. This will be all the things that happened in the month of March for me as a way to kind of catch up and chat with you guys. So if you're new here, that means that you might not be aware of my format, but I typically talk about the books I read, the things I wrote, and some personal life tidbits. And those personal life tidbits can be anything from just fun things I think that happened to me in the month to things that are going on in my graduate program, or sometimes, and more recently, I've been incorporating some movies and TV show discussions as well. So without further ado, let's just jump in. The first thing, as always, is I'm going to talk about the books that I read. And starting off strong, I read Lore Olympus by Rachel Smith, which is the very, very popular webtoon comic. So my history with Lore Olympus is that I would every now and then catch a few episodes or based like on things that I would see, sometimes those Facebook ads I would read, but I never stayed consistent with webtoons just because I would typically forget about it. And previously, like when it was coming out, I didn't have a lot of storage on my cell phone to read my webtoons at the time. So I would typically and more often delete tons and tons of things off my phone in order to be able to make videos on my phone. So with that said, I was never consistent. So this was the first time that I really read from start to current with Lore Olympus. And this is the volume 1 bind up. I did get a signed book plate for it, which I was super excited for, and I'm definitely going to buy all of the bind ups. So I'm obsessed. So much so that in the month of March, after I finished this book, I decided that I needed to continue. And I downloaded webtoons, and in an entire Saturday early in March, it was like the second weekend, I think, I did nothing but read that webtoon. So every single episode to date, I read all of them. I love it. I'm obsessed. I love the story. I love the themes. I love the twists on the Greek myths, including the traditional Greek myth, like lore. So I'm just obsessed. I love this. I really like the Hades Persephone retelling, though I know a critique from some people is that Persephone is always like painted as innocent, and she definitely is when this book takes place. But I'm seeing her come into her personality, and I'm really excited to see where the webcomic goes. So as of this date, when the video goes up, the newest episode isn't coming out till late April. So that was actually on hiatus. So I'm kind of glad that I read the webtoon when I did, because it has been on hiatus for several months, I believe. So I kind of caught up just in time for it to come back from its hiatus, and I'm very excited. So, I mean, I really like this. I think if you're not into reading on a phone or device, getting the bind up is a really good way to enjoy this story, especially if you like comics or graphic novels. Keep in mind, this is like a comic, so there's way more emphasis on pictures, and there's not a lot of words to read, so you can read it very quickly. Overall, really love this, highly recommend. The next book that I finished in the month of March is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. This is a book that follows an orphan named Rin, and Rin has lived her life kind of in the care of people who took her in begrudgingly. They are primarily farmers, but they kind of have an opium trade as well, and Rin does not really want the life that they have set up for her by marrying her off to someone who will take her and essentially just becoming a wife and a mother and not really having anything more. And she's determined to change her fate by studying and taking the test to get into a school that will pay for her to be there. And the only school that does this is an elite military academy called Sign Guard. And again, she's like super determined. She recruits someone to help her, and lo and behold, she does test into it and gets accepted. And because of that, she gets a full ride, which means all of her things are paid for as long as she is able to meet their requirements. And then from there, the whole journey, like first half of the book is her getting into this academy and like doing her school thing, but it does quickly move into the after graduation, and the second half of the book really heavily focuses on the war that they are in. So it's definitely a heavy political book, and it's also inspired by China's 20th century wars and their like civil unrest. So I can't really speak to the history of China, but it was really refreshing to kind of get a new perspective on world history, especially with one I wasn't familiar with. Of course, with a lot of liberties and fantastical elements in it, there's definitely magic, there's connection to gods. So overall, I was very blown away. This was compounded by the fact that the author is incredibly young and wrote this incredibly young. I believe now she's in her mid-20s, but still, I mean, she has 3 books under her belt and they're pretty big epic tomes. So just the fact that this came out of someone so young and talented, I'm very excited to see how the rest of the series goes. I really recommend it. It is a longer book, but I enjoyed it, and I did it for a buddy read with my book club. So I actually started a book club with some friends over on Discord, and I am going to formally announce it here if anyone wants to join us. We just finished the Poppy War, and we're going to have a bit of an internal conversation about that and kind of see where that leads us. I believe the next book we are going to read is Empire of the Vampire by J. Kristoff, and kind of discuss that. So if you're interested, we don't have a set date for when we're going to begin reading that book, but I will leave the Discord link down below in case you're interested. And the last book that I read in the month of March was Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. So this book pretty much takes the classic myth of Ariadne, who was the wife of Dionysus in Greek mythology, and tells her story and tries to flesh it out a little bit more to give her more complexity or more depth than the myths would allow. I know that this book was pitched as a Circe comparison book because Circe by Madeline Miller was also taking a lesser known woman in Greek mythology and fleshing out her story. It's also touted as a feminist novel, and I think it was a so-so book. I definitely was invested, and I kept reading the book, and I was interested to see where things went, but there were definitely some things that missed the mark for me. It is a very like dour book, really. Like nothing in Ariadne's life was very pleasant for her, and even when things might have been pleasant, there was a lot of doubt and a lot of shame and a lot of confusion in her life, and she just never seemed to be fully happy throughout the book. It was definitely hard to be able to stay focused sometimes, and I think there were definitely moments where I was listening to an audiobook and I just kind of lost what was happening, but it didn't really seem to matter. And I'm also someone who really was not familiar with the myth of Ariadne beforehand, so in theory I would have been really lost, but I don't think it mattered too much. However, there were definitely good moments. There were some interesting scenes in the book, and it was just middle of the road for me. I may consider doing another read from Jennifer Saint. She is coming out with a book on Electra, and I love mythology in any capacity, so I might pick that one up, but I don't know how much farther I would get after that if the second book doesn't wow me in the way that something like Circe did. So overall, I definitely think if you're a Greek myth buff, this might miss the mark for you, but if you're like a casual Greek fan or just really like literary fiction, then you probably would like this. So let's go into the things I wrote in the month of March. And as you may know, if you've been on my channel and I've been watching some of my vlogs, I was really pushing to query in the month of March. And not because I was trying to rush things, but because I genuinely felt like I was at the point where I should query it. Now, there were definitely some things I needed to fix or update and change. So in the month of March, I really focused on honing my skills and getting some outside professional feedback on my material. So in the month of March, I received feedback on my first 10 pages, feedback twice on my query letter, and feedback on my synopsis, all which were paid out of my pocket to get professionally critiqued. I definitely had a good experience overall. The manuscript critique, the 10 pages, I feel like gave me more out of it because I was able to kind of see something from other people's perspectives, like what worked for me and how other people might read it better, which I definitely took into consideration and made a lot of changes to my first 10 pages. Also, I retweaked my query letter again and got that looked at by two different people. One person which kind of rewrote some things based on my synopsis, the other person rewrote some things based on my first 10 pages. So I got two different perspectives and I was able to combine them with some different wording structures to hopefully make my query letter much stronger. And I did, before I submitted it, I had changed it once more. So based on all the Reddit feedback I received and just how I felt like I should be pitching it, I changed my query letter, got the feedback, and as a result, I realized that some of the things that made my query letter strong were not fully in my book. Like the thought was there, but I never fully executed it. And for example, I'll use the fact that like my main character has to run to escape soldiers, but I never really said why, and I never put the stakes so high. So I was able to kind of go back into my novel and say, okay, so if the soldiers stated why they were coming to arrest her mother and stated that she was being arrested for kidnapping, and her mother hid her and told her to stay hidden and not find her, this would all be cause for my main character to leave because, well, my mother has to be innocent or like I need answers either way. So I just was able to really amp the stakes up in my first 50 pages, I would say. And I think it would make more sense like throughout the rest of the book, like tightening up those pages, because a lot of things that I had in the beginning previously might not have made sense for the long run, like why they were doing things or why they kept questioning things or why they kept pushing forward. And I think it does make sense now. So by redoing my query letter, I was able to fix some potential flaws in early on in my manuscript. So overall, I'm very, very happy with the changes I made in my manuscript. I think it makes it so much stronger. I have much more interactions and much less accepting from my main character. Like she accepted a lot of things way too easily, I think, but also asked the wrong questions. Like my main character has the right to ask questions because the situation is very intense and crazy for her, but she wasn't asking the right ones. So now she does. So I'm very excited just overall how I changed things. And even if at the end of all of this, I don't get anywhere currently with this novel, I don't doubt that one day I can publish it. Whether it's now or 10 years and it might need some more work, but I do think every step of the way I am making it stronger in some way. So with that said, I did all of that, and technically this is April 1st that it happened, but between the 31st of March and April 1st, I did start querying. So I have a vlog coming out for that. That'll like be my next upload. So be on the lookout and we'll see how that goes. But that was the majority of my writing in the month. In addition to that, I didn't do too much else, but I did write a little bit more in my co-written project, which is my rom-com with my co-writer Caitlin. We have been slowly kind of working on that as it flows with us. Currently, there's no pressure on that novel, and it is just a fun stress relief novel for us. Even though we both are obsessed with it and love it, it is just kind of nice not to have like a timeline for that project. And I used to stress myself out a lot, feeling like I should be doing something, and I'm not saying should anymore. I don't feel like that's productive for me. So I'm just going to say that I want to when I get to it. And that's really all I have for writing. So moving into some of my personal tidbits, I don't have a lot to say, which is good because I feel like I can keep this brief. But in the month of March, I continued doing my grad school, and I did get a little behind on my clinical hours. So I do need to step up in April just because I had a lot of cancellations. So it was a little bit hard for me because I thought I would be fine with this, but in the world of outpatient, especially community mental health, cancellations are very common. So it's just making sure that I stay on top of things, and I do have a couple fail safes in place for April, so I should remain on top of my business. I've also been trying to just keep in touch with people more, because I do tend to withdraw a lot especially when I get hyper focused on things. And with the work and the school and all that I'm doing in my life, sometimes it can get very lonely, and sometimes I don't even talk to people that I live with, like my partner. So I have been trying to be a little bit more conscious about just reaching out to people and doing things when I feel like I'm in a good headspace, because I don't want it to feel forced and I don't want it to feel like an obligation. So for instance, like one time I was doing the dishes and I was like, I'll call my mom right now. I'm in a good mood. And I did. I had a really nice conversation with my mom. And then another time I called a friend and talked to her for like an hour and a half. So just doing things like that has made me feel really good, especially because sometimes my inclination when I get busy is to just not talk to people. But it doesn't always work out for me. So trying to find that balance has been hard but rewarding. And then of course I also watched some TV in the month. So I continued watching Ink Master, and we finished another season. I believe we finished season 4 in March. So we moved on to season 5, and I still love it. I don't really have much comments about Ink Master because it's just reality TV, but I'm realizing how much more I look at tattoos now, so it might be a detriment to me, but it just means I'm going to be super picky when it comes to getting tattoos in the future, and making sure that I do like the artist and the work, and making sure that I can be proud of something that I have. We started the Halo series on Paramount. Only one episode had come out in the month of March, but it was an interesting episode. I don't have any knowledge about Halo other than playing multiplayer mode. That's the only thing I've ever played. I didn't grow up with them. I never had an Xbox. I never really had means to play Halo. And I never read the books because they just weren't offered to me. So because of that, I don't know anything about Halo, and I can just kind of objectively enjoy the show. But from the first episode, there's potential. I think it is so far well shot. Some of the dialogue is a bit rough and generic, but I'm excited to see where it goes, and we're just gonna kind of roll with it. I definitely watched other shows, and every time I come here, I'm like, well, that happened. I think, in the beginning of March, we watched Upload season 2 on Amazon Prime. At least I think it was in March. I don't even know. I feel like March was a very long month, coming after February especially. But if you don't know what Upload is, it basically takes place in the future where people essentially find a way to upload their consciousness to a digital place so that people can never really die, and the people with the living can still interact with their uploaded consciousness of their loved ones and their friends. So in the beginning, there is a man who is trying to create a free space for people who can't afford to be able to upload to these lavish places, and to give everyone a chance to kind of have that immortality life when he just suddenly dies very unexpectedly. And the first season kind of tries to figure out, if there's something more to his death. And there's a little bit of a romance as well. And the second season picks up right after the first season ended, and definitely had some high stakes. And the ending, I think it's green lighted for a third season, but if not, I'm gonna die, because the cliffhanger of season 2 was just way too much for me to wait for 2 years to come out. So that's where we're at. And I also watched Into the Spider-Verse finally with my husband, and I loved it. I knew I would. Spider-Man's my favorite superhero, and I just don't know why I waited so long for us to watch it. Probably because it's a cartoon, and my husband is sometimes weird with cartoons. We've watched tons together, by the way, but sometimes he's picky and when he wants to watch it. But I am happy that we finally got to. Definitely love it. Definitely looking forward to the second one. And I'm excited just to see where they're going to take the story. And otherwise, my life hasn't been too exciting because I just pretty much work, do my internship, and write. And somewhere in there, I try to live life as a normal human. but I'm okay. I'm feeling much better. The weather is absolute shit where I live, and I really want it to be warmer. So I'm just hoping April brings something above 50, because 20, 30-degree days are not doing it for me. So yeah, that's all I have for today. Let me know how your March went, what you wrote, what you read, if anything exciting happened to you, and let's start a conversation down in the comments. Otherwise, that's all for me today. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and until next time, I'll see you then. Bye!